imagine sledding with a GoPro on your head. It's a kind of a different world we live in, but the love of a winter pastime, such as tobogganing, could potentially be under fire in the jurisdiction that you live in. And why? Well, lawsuits. For more on this, I'm joined by our Sun News contributor, Laurie Goldstein, and Dr. Charles Tater, who is one of Canada's preeminent brain surgeons. Gentlemen, thank you to both of you for being here. Appreciate it. All right, Dr. Tater, let me start with you. This is one of those sorts of stories where a lot of people read it, they see the headline, and they're like, wait a second. This is something that we've all done for as long as snow has fallen in this country. What's the problem here?
Well, the problem is that unless everything is right, you can get a major injury. You know, I'm not talking about the cuts and the bruises and the sprains and strains, but I'm talking about broken necks or major brain injuries that can have a permanent effect and put people in wheelchairs. And it doesn't happen very often, but when it happens, it could be catastrophic. And at Parachute Canada, which is the injury prevention agency that I volunteer for, we have a whole set of guidelines for people who go tobogganing. We want people to go tobogganing.
Yeah, you don't want people, like, look, the first thing when the snow actually falls for my son, who's 5, that's the first thing he wants to go out and do.
Exactly.
And that's so it's not like you don't agree with the ban.
I do not agree with the ban, but I agree with trying to make the activity as safe as possible. And that means that the individual who's doing it, the mums and dads, the kids themselves, should be aware that injuries can happen and that there are ways to prevent the injuries. For example, there shouldn't be trees at the bottom of the run.
That seems like a logical thing.
There shouldn't be a cement park bench there. There shouldn't be a street there that the toboggan runs out onto. And the kids should be wearing helmets, and so should the parents.
Okay, Laurie, a lot of this, whenever we get this type of government injection into our lives, banning things, we're not big fans of that. It always has to do with some aspect of the law. There were a few lawsuits, so now municipalities are sort of freaked out a little bit. They don't want to be paying tax dollars in order to, but there's things a municipality can actually do to avoid those things. Dr. Tater mentions the trees at the bottom of a hill. Get rid of those. There seems to be a more practical approach than an outward ban.
Look, the problem I think we have with municipalities is not that there are lawyers, but that they get advice from lawyers who are going to tell them don't do anything. But the problem is, in the rare times it happens, for example, there was a Hamilton case where they ended up having to pay $900,000 to a lawyer who had severe injuries.
And they have a ban in Hamilton.
But there were specific reasons why they lost. For example, yes, they'd said it was illegal, and yes, they had signs, but they didn't have a lot of signs. Right, it was poorly marked. Second, they had a fence making so you couldn't possibly go down. The fence was destroyed by vandalism. They didn't replace the fence. Right, they had exactly the thing that the Dr. Tater said. They had a storm sewer ditch at the bottom. Right, and that's where this guy he hit the storm sewer ditch, stopped his forward motion, and then had grievous injuries. So it's all about good judgment and common sense. It's that yes, you should have predominant signs saying you do so at your own risk. Second of all, we recommend that you have on that all members have on helmets and those things. And also, people have to use good judgment and common sense. The best way to protect yourself from injury or your child from injury is not to point the toboggan at a if your child is too young to steer, then don't have your child go on. Have the appropriate size of hill, but just banning things like here's the absurdity in Toronto. On the ski hill in Etobicoke, they ban tobogganing. Well, if you're going to be like that, why didn't you ban skiing? Skiing is just as can be. So it's really all about rather than going from one extreme, just take your chances, to the other extreme, nobody can do anything. How about look, this is an activity. The odds are, as Dr. Tater said, everything's going to be fine. It's good for you. It's healthy to get out in the air. But there is a risk. There is a risk. So let's minimize those risks.
There's a risk walking out your front door. But Dr. Tater, I want to go back a little bit to. We don't keep very good statistics in Canada with respect to this, do we? But I mean, there's this problem that we have in this day and age with bubble wrapping our kids. We won't let them climb trees. We won't let them go play on the jungle gym. We won't let them do all these sorts of things. Again, I want to go back to the fact that no one's advocating, at least not at this table, an outward ban. But how, put this into some perspective for us, because you do see the patients that are the aftermath of the irresponsibility. There are irresponsible people. They're not people that use common sense. There are those parents that say, hey, let's push the envelope a little bit more. Let's go over this hill a little bit faster. Little Johnny or Janie can handle it when they can't. So let's go back a little bit and talk about some of these more practical approaches.
Well, you know, in injury prevention, it's not just one remedy that's going to make the difference. It's not like penicillin for pneumonia. It's a whole bunch of things. It means that the person himself or herself has to take precaution. The mother and the father have to be aware of all of the risks, and the municipalities. And I'd like to point to the city of Vaughan. 3 or 4 years ago, I was invited to be on a committee that they put up, instigated by Sandra Racco, who was a counselor in the city of Vaughan at that time. And she took it upon herself to make sure that the city of Vaughan had a tobogganing policy. And I thought that was a great thing to do. And they designated a hill, and they made sure there were no trees at the bottom, no park benches, no streets. There were signs, there was lights, so if someone wanted to do it at night. So it was a safe toboggan hill. And I think that's what all the municipalities should do. Rather than ban it, they should say, okay, here's our safe toboggan hill. And that will protect them, I think, against liability if they've taken those precautions, and it'll keep the kids active.
Because if you've got a city-owned park, you can't just say it's banned and walk away.
That's right.
That's the problem with people who don't understand the law. Laws look at specific cases, right? And exactly, if there were to be a lawsuit arising out of this, there would be a defense. Well, look at all the things we did, right? We couldn't help it that the parents showed up inebriated, you know. But that's what courts look at. Courts look at, did you make reasonable efforts? And so what municipality, and to be fair, most Canadian municipalities are not doing this. Let's be clear. There's this one law about the Etobicoke ski hill, and then Edmonton and Hamilton, but most of them aren't. And the way to approach it is, look, these are city-owned properties. Manage your property responsibly. Warn people about the dangers. Make the physical location safe, right? And then you'll be protected from lawsuits, and we'll have the great benefit of winter sports in Canada.
Yeah.
Otherwise, close the swimming pools because there's a risk there.
Well,
close the ice skating
rinks. Everything. I mean, we know that there is a risk with every sport. It doesn't matter what it is, but these are realities. Quickly before I let you gentlemen go, we're showing B-roll and footage that every Canadian recognizes. You know, there's that little girl going head first.
Bad.
Dr. Tater, that's bad, right?
Even I know that. Bad idea.
You should not go head first. You should either be sitting or kneeling. In fact, one of the first cases that I treated was a woman who broke her neck, and she was going head first. So there are precautions, there are ways of preventing these catastrophic injuries, and ways of being active in the winter, enjoying the sports.
Okay, great discussion, gentlemen.